Hi ladies, welcome to our second part of ecology, so advanced ecology. So I'm doing this in a slightly different way, so hopefully you find it useful. So the things we're going to go through in advanced ecology, girls, are the following. So we're going to be looking at pollution, conservation, competition, parasitism, limiting factors of human populations as well. Let's start off first of all with population. Now, there's a really nice way of kind of observing the huge changes that we've made on Earth, and I think that's from space. So I'm going to play a short little bit of a video that I think is quite impactful in terms of looking at the damage that we've done to the Earth. Now, if you look at this, girls, we are looking at Earth from the space station. So you can see your aurora borealis, your northern lights, but you can see the cities. You can actually see where we're habitating, okay, on the Earth from space, okay? So you can see, look, there's big, huge cities. All of the lit areas are cities. So it gives you an indication of the type of impact we're having on the Earth. Now, one reason our dominance, girls, is our intelligence. Because we've learned how to use tools, and we've learned how to farm, we've learned how to create some sorts of medicines that are going to prolong our lives, and which means that we currently are the top predators on Earth. Now, obviously, we can still meet a bear and still be eaten, or we can still meet a shark in Australia and still, be eaten as well. But we are technically the top predators on Earth, and that means that our populations our population numbers have grown slightly, have grown hugely over time, and they don't reflect the normal patterns usually seen in populations. Now, so our dominance has led us to the following. So hugely affecting ecosystems. We could see that from space. Removing natural resources at astonishing rates. So we know that in regards to our fossil fuels, our rainforests, those huge issues this year with our rainforests in terms of fires, and introducing organisms in different habitats. So sometimes we'll introduce predators into habitats that have a huge detrimental effect on those habitats. We'll talk about that a little bit later on when we're talking about pest control, and also polluting the areas that we live in. And we see that around us day to day, and we're well aware of the global warming issues that Greta Thunberg is bringing our attention to. Now, pollution, the definition, girls, in terms of science, and when you're asked for it in your exams, pollution is any undesirable change in the environment. So you can't just say it's throwing plastic into the sea or that it's burning fossil fuels, okay? It has to cover all of the different types of pollution that exist. So it's any undesirable change to the environment. There are three types of pollution, girls. Domestic pollution, that's the one that we create from home. Agricultural pollution, so that's the pollution that's caused through farming. So, for example, slurry running into rivers. What else? Eutrophication in rivers as well from too much fertilizer being added to the soils. And also industrial pollution too. So there's a really good film coming out soon. I think it's called Dark Waters, all about industrial pollution and the type of pollution that chemical companies could be putting into our rivers. Now, one type of pollution which has massively impacted life on Earth was the use of CFCs in the 70s and 80s. It was used in aerosol cans and used in refrigerators. Now, we didn't realise it at the time, but CFCs were breaking down what's called our ozone layer around the Earth. Now, our ozone layer, girls, it's essentially like a big layer of sunblock around the Earth. It stops too much UV harmful radiation from penetrating the Earth's atmosphere and therefore causing DNA damage both to plants and animals. So it causes things like skin cancer. Now, it just happened that, and it's not to do with Australia or New Zealand using more CFCs than anywhere else, but the CFCs all accumulated around where Australia and New Zealand are, meaning there was a huge hole in the ozone layer over those two countries. So skin cancer rates rocketed. Now, it's not all bad news though, okay? We've stopped our use of CFCs, I think it was in the 90s, and our ozone is regenerating over time. So we've replaced our use of CFCs with another type of compound, and our ozone will regenerate. Now, don't get global warming and ozone depletion mixed up. They're very different. So global warming is from an increase of greenhouse gases being pumped into the atmosphere. So your carbon dioxide from your cars and your industries, and your methane from your cattle farming, okay? They trap heat energy around the Earth and gradually increase our temperature over time. Whereas the ozone layer is like, remember, the layer of sunblock around the Earth that stops too much harmful radiation get through. So they're two very different things. Now we're going to talk about conservation. So conservation is the wise management of existing resources. So currently we're trying to conserve the panda. Okay, its numbers are rapidly dropping because its habitat is being broken down, and bamboo forests are being, decimated, both to make room for farming, but also bamboo is a really useful material used in building in China as well. So therefore, the pandas are left with nowhere to live. So there's been what are called breeding programs in China. Now, pandas are not the most romantic of animals, so they've been very, very difficult to breed. And they only breed, I think it's every 2 years. So it's kind of difficult to time. So they've done what's called artificial insemination. So that's taking sperm from a male panda and placing it in a female panda while the female panda is asleep. And that's led to some success with breeding pandas. But you got to think about whether that's actually worth doing or not. If we don't have any habitat to introduce those pandas to, is there going to be any use that we have lots of pandas in zoos? Okay, they'll just end up in captivity. So we kind of have to weigh up the pros and cons of that. Now, for years, we've been using our natural resources unwisely. So we've caused desertification, okay, in certain areas by over-farming. And we have overfished our seas, and we have overmined our mines as well, okay, and caused a huge amount of damage. So we are only now starting to realise the benefits and the importance of conservation. Now, you need to know one example of an industry that is trying to use conservation to help certain types of organisms. So fishing will be an easy one to go for. So in Europe, okay, we're only allowed to use certain types of fishing nets. So therefore, smaller fish that haven't bred yet can escape the nets and still go on and breed. There's also quotas. So you're only allowed a certain number of kilograms of salmon, or only a certain number of kilograms of tuna, and the rest have to be put back into the sea. And only adult fish of a certain size can be sold, okay? So that is to try and ensure that our fish stocks remain high and that we don't completely decimate them. Now, competition, girls. Okay, so competition is a word that we use in everyday English that, I'm sure you're using appropriately, but you need to know its definition and the different types for science. So in terms of humans, girls, like I said, our pattern follows a slightly different pattern than all the other organisms are, because we are the top predators, okay? However, having said that, there is still a lot of competition within the human species. We'll talk about the types of that now in a sec. Now, for most organisms, girls, and for most predator and prey, they follow this kind of matching up and down kind of pattern, okay, in their numbers, all right? So here we've got the number of rabbits. When the number of rabbits become low due to over hunting by the foxes, the number of foxes will go low soon after because there's not enough to eat. Then the number of rabbits will increase again because the number of foxes are reduced. Then the number of foxes will increase again. So they follow this kind of pattern that is very similar, because obviously predators are required to eat prey to stay alive. Prey are, prey need to have no predators there to breed to increase their numbers, okay? So their patterns are really, really closely monitored. So that's called the predator-prey pattern, okay? Now, population numbers are affected by the following 4 factors. So competition between organisms of the same species and different species, predation, so is something hunting an organism, parasitism, so whether something has come along and living off another organism and causing it harm, and symbiosis, so that's when more than one type of organism are living together and they're both benefiting from it. So competition, so that's where organisms struggle for resources that are in short supply. So competition leads to a reduced number of organisms in the population. So the types of competition that occur, girls, you've got intraspecific competition, so that's within a species, okay? And then interspecific competition, that's outside a species, all right? So within, think of intravenous, so within a vein, okay? Intraspecific means within a species, interspecific means outside a species, or 2 different species competing for the same thing. Now, there are 2 types of competition within both of those subtitles, okay? You've got contest competition. That is where the 2 individuals fight for a resource and only one individual gets the resource, okay? So for example, you and your brother could be fighting over a piece of toast, okay? You could be really nice and share it, but more than likely one of you is going to win out, okay, on that. So that's contest competition. Then scramble competition will be if you do decide to be really nice and share the resource. So that's where small amounts of resources are given to different individuals, but they all get less than they want. So plants will be a good example of scramble competition, where plants, they're all competing for light, all competing for water and minerals in the soil, and they all share them, okay? And these are all different species of plants, so we would say that's interspecific competition. Here we've got two meerkats fighting, possibly over a mate. So two meerkats fighting, that will be intra-specific competition, and more than likely with meerkats, one of them is going to win out. They're not going to share a mate, but one of them is going to get the mate. So we'd say that is a contest competition. If we look at these elephants sharing water out of a stream, so again, they're all the same species, so that's intra-specific competition, and more than likely they will all share it rather than one person winning out, so it's scramble competition. Now we're going to talk about predation. So a predator is something that's going to kill, catch, and eat another organism. So predation reduces population numbers. Humans have used this in the past as a form of pest control, sometimes successfully, sometimes not so. So if your nanas or granddads or your mums or dads are into roses, they probably allow they probably don't like green fly on the roses. So sometimes what they'll do, if they find a ladybird in the garden, they'll introduce it onto the rose bush, because ladybirds like to eat green flies, okay? Now, we've done this in the past quite unsuccessfully with what's called the cane toad. The cane toad was introduced to Australia to try and eat pests off the crops, but unfortunately the cane toad had no natural predator, so its numbers spiraled out of control. Then we had snakes, which there's obviously lots of in Australia, came along and ate the cane toads, and cane toads are really poisonous, so it killed lots of natural snakes. Now that obviously sounds like not such a bad thing, but actually it is a bad thing, because those are natural predators in Australia, and therefore whole ecosystems are affected by it. So predators and prey are adapted to their roles. You can tell very easily by looking at an organism whether it's a predator or whether it's going to be prey. By the position of their eyes, if they're forward facing, that's really good for judging distances and hunting. If they're side facing, they're generally prey, so that's really good for keeping an eye out for predators. If they have sharp teeth, that means more than likely they're carnivores. They're going to be able to tear apart and eat meat. If they have blunt teeth, they're more than likely going to be herbivores, okay? So predators and prey both have specific adaptations for their roles. Now, parasitism. This always makes people a bit itchy when we're talking about this. So lice will be an example of a parasite. A tick, which is that picture there, will be an example of a parasite. So this is where something lives off another organism, causing it harm. Now, it doesn't kill it, okay? So just be aware that it's not it's not in the organism's interest to kill its host, because it wants to live off it. Other types of parasites include gastrointestinal worms. Lovely. They live within somebody, in somebody's intestines. So they're called endoparasites, live within them. And an exoparasite will be like a tick or lice, where they live outside the organism. And like I said, parasites are unlikely to cause huge damage to a host because they want to live off them. Now, symbiosis, that's where two things live together and both of them benefit. So our bacteria in our gut will be an example of that, and also the bacteria, the nitrogen-fixing bacteria that live in the roots of legumes, are an example of that too. Now, human population limitation. So why humans are a little bit different than the rest of the predators, but also what does limit our population numbers. So we have no real predators, like I said, and we're quite intelligent. So we have developed medicines, we've developed tools to kill other things, and we have high birth rates, okay? And that's led to huge population growth in certain areas. However, that's starting to decline in other areas due to high education, the availability of contraception, particularly the females wanting to achieve a high level of education, and maybe due to economic reasons as well. The birth rates are declining, and some countries are having to incentivize people to have kids. And I think that's currently the case at the moment in Italy. The birth rate is quite low, so some people are given like extra money for having more kids and things like that. They're trying to encourage more people to have more babies. Now, things that do limit human population growth are the following: war, famine, contraception, and obviously disease. And we're obviously in the midst of the coronavirus at the moment, so we're seeing that firsthand at the moment. Now, ladies, that's ecology 2. I'm hoping that's clear enough. I will give you a few exam questions on this a little bit later on, perhaps next week. I hope that's okay. Thanks, ladies.